Hello and welcome to episode 89 of Communicast, the podcast dedicated to enhancing communication skills. I'm your host, Scott D'Amico, president of Communispond. Today I'm joined by Julia Quijano, a leadership expert with a psychology background and founder of Congruent Leadership. Julia serves as a leadership consultant to venture-backed companies around the world. In this episode, we explore how communication shapes leadership, the importance of curiosity and emotional intelligence, and how the micro moments define great communicators. If you want to refine your leadership style and make a bigger impact, this episode's for you. Let's dive in. Julia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
My pleasure. Really looking forward to the conversation. Before we get too deep into it, if you can, tell the listeners just a little bit about you, your career journey, and the exciting work that you're doing today.
Yeah, happy to. Well, my career certainly kind of started by accident. I was born and raised in Silicon Valley and grew up in Silicon Valley in the 90s. So as you can imagine, that was quite an interesting time in innovation and tech and venture capital. But growing up, I really didn't grow up a part of that community. Nobody in my family had worked in tech. And it was very much kind of a tent that I wasn't a part of. And when I graduated college, I really stumbled into business, and I stumbled into tech through a company called Salesforce. And at the time, Salesforce was not the behemoth that it is today. I think I joined when the company was less than 5,000 employees globally, and really got to see hyper growth at a very, very young age. And that opened up my entire world to not only business, not only leadership and strategy and execution, but it really, really taught me how much business and leadership is all about people. And my real love, the thing that I've always studied and loved, is psychology. And so that really brought me to pursue a graduate degree in psychology, and really saw these worlds of people and business come together in a way that just kind of blew my mind. And so for the next kind of decade of my career, I really spent time just exploring what I call all different sides of the conference table, really trying to understand the investor perspective, the CEO perspective, and understand how leadership looks at all of those stages and all of those seats. And that is what really brought me to what I'm doing today. I have worked my entire life alongside and with some of the best leaders. And I've really come to believe that there's such an incredible way to navigate that role, whatever function, whatever hat you wear. And so a few years ago, I launched my own company, really focusing on working with and developing leaders, mostly in the startup and venture capital space, and helping unlock them and really be helping them grow into the best version of themselves that they could be as leaders. And so that's what we're up to today.
Fascinating. That is quite a journey. And wow, what a company to stumble into, of Salesforce early on. It's just such a fascinating organization, not only from their tools and their products, but from their leadership. Having a number of friends and neighbors and former colleagues that work there or have worked there, I am sure, as you mentioned, a tremendous learning experience from leadership and people and sales and communication. So I'm sure you just were able to soak up so much there and use it as you move forward into some of these other ventures and opportunities. And if I think about that experience combined with the work that you're doing today, working a lot with startups and leaders and that whole facet of business, you've likely encountered some amazing communicators, and likely equally probably some folks that are great at their jobs, but not fantastic communicators, right? And I think we can learn from both of those. But if you think about that, like if you think through your experience and the folks that you've worked with, some of those really great communicators, right? When you hear that somebody's a strong communicator, they have great communication skills, what's that mean to you? What's the image that comes to mind?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's so interesting because the image that comes to mind is actually so different than what I think a great communicator is, especially today, right? The image that comes to mind is the keynote stage, right? It's the big public speaking, it's the large audiences, it's the all eyes on you and delivering this huge message out to many, right? That's immediately what I think of. But yeah, in my work with leaders, day in and day out, many of them do hop on keynote stages, but not every day, right? Not all day, every day. And the way that they are leading is through these micro moments in their days, and it's in the interpersonal communication, not large public speaking. And so when and absolutely, I have seen some of the most incredible, influential, inspiring, um, really moving leaders who communicate in such a way that brings everybody together and moves everybody forward. And I've seen a lot of communication breakdown in, some of the smallest examples, whether it's a dialogue with a co-founder or an all hands meeting or a meeting or just, a regular meeting that you have. And what I found is that what I understand a great communicator to be are those who really understand the difference between intention and impact. I think oftentimes we think about communication as speaking or even writing, emails, texting, even listening. But when you can really match what you intend to communicate, whether that's with your body language or your words, with an impact that you actually intend to make, that I think is the most powerful and really exemplary version of what great communication looks like, right? How often have we heard somebody speak and then say, oh, well, that's not what I meant, or I didn't intend that, right? Well, if you don't intend it, you know that you're not going to have the same impact if what's coming out of your mouth or how you're communicating, even if you're just on the listening side, isn't matching what you intended internally. So it's really about that. Matching the intention and the impact is what I do a lot of my work on with leaders today, actually.
One of the past guests, and I refer to this quite a bit, said something that's really stuck with me. It is that 100% of what is said by the listener. And it goes back to this idea of intention versus impact. I could have the greatest intention in the world. I know in my mind what I'm trying to communicate, but ultimately, what's important is, Julia, what did you take from that? What did you ultimately hear and carry forward? So I love this idea. You need to try to match as closely as possible your intention with the impact. And that goes to things like trying not to use overcomplicated language. And I would think a lot in the tech world, not using jargon that your audience may not understand, especially if you are knee deep on the technical side, talking to investors that might not know, that exact world or understanding. So it's all these different things that are going to help close the gap, so to speak, between intention and impact. And the other thing that you mentioned there that I really stuck with me was this idea of leading in the micro moments. When it comes to communication, right? There is that perception that great communicators are the orators. They're up on the stage, they're giving a rousing speech, they're getting a crowd riled up. But it really happens in the day-to-day minutia, the nuances, and it's as simple as how you quickly respond to an email. And as leaders, it's important to understand the outsized impact that your words or lack of words have on your team. Sometimes you're just moving through the airport, responding to an email with a quick yeah, period. Completely innocuous to you, but somebody on the receiving end of that, especially maybe if it's a challenging time of the business or there's lots of change going on, they see that, they're like, oh my gosh, what's he mean? Yeah. right? Is this a good yeah? Is this a bad yeah? So it is. It's all these little tiny things. Great communication is the culmination of all these little micro moments throughout your days, weeks, months, and years.
100%.
Julie, as you think about, and I'm sure this probably relates a bit more to the work that you're doing today, what are some of the key communication skills that you really are seeing as being mission critical, right? For these founders, these leaders, folks working in startups, whether they're, trying to grow the business, they're seeking investments. What are some of those key skills that you're really working with folks to develop?
Mm. Yeah, definitely. There are two that immediately come to mind. And this comes back to kind of that interpersonal communication work, right? I think we can talk all day long about, you know, what we're trying to say, how we say it, even, what a lot of those active listening skills look like on the other side of that. But when it comes to really the key skills, what comes down to, in my mind, the root of good communication, it's really about curiosity, and it's about empathy and emotional intelligence. And, I think we use those words so often. And I think we all actually have slightly different definitions, or we make different meaning out of what those words mean. But when I think about curiosity, I think about interest, I think about genuine interest, and I think about patience, right? When you are curious, when you're really leaning in, it isn't just about having a million questions. It's about truly, genuinely getting deeply interested in what's happening around you and what's happening with that person on the other side of you. Because as we communicate, there's so much that we're sharing from our internal world, our internal thoughts, our internal feelings. And they may come across as words, they may come across as body language, but we're communicating so much of how we understand the world and of how we're trying to convey or even understand the message. And so when we think about curiosity and then really pair that with empathy and pair that with emotional intelligence, I'm not just talking about, oh, imagine how that other person might feel. I'm really talking about, are you able to identify your own experience, your own feelings, and also imagine what might be happening for that other person, so that through the words, through the sound, through the body language, we can actually more deeply understand the context and the meaning of the message that is being shared in whatever forum we're in. And I think those two, that curiosity with emotional intelligence, is so critical to anything you're trying to communicate anywhere with anybody in the world. That's really the bedrock to me.
Yeah, I think of the emotional intelligence, it really is that combination of awareness of self, which a lot of people are self aware, and then awareness of others. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are aware of others.
Mm-hmm.
When you combine the two, where I'm very much aware of myself, my actions, my thoughts, my decisions, what I'm putting out there, but then I'm also aware of how might this be received?
Mm-hmm.
Why might it be received this way? That's an important component of they may disagree, they may not sit well with them, but why, understanding their background, their context of where what they've been through. So you look at both sides of that,
Mm-hmm.
and I think really helps when it comes to leadership and communication, having somebody that can, so to speak, read the room,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of a better term. And when you talked about curiosity, that's something that it comes up periodically in these discussions, but the connection you made there to curiosity and patience
Mm-hmm.
really hasn't come up a whole lot. And I loved what you said there, that being curious doesn't just mean you ask lots of questions. I'm curious. I do ask lots of questions, but there's other people that are very curious. They might ask two questions in an entire conversation, but you can tell they truly care about what you're saying. They're leaned in, they're locked in, they're not checking their phone. Maybe they're asking some follow-up questions. So there's there's not a direct one-to-one connection between the number of questions somebody asks and their level of curiosity. It's demonstrated in a number of ways. And when I think you really are curious about something, you will have that patience to let the other person talk about it or to do your own research, your own homework, and not just abandon it immediately.
Absolutely. You know, as we talk about this emotional intelligence piece, right? It does connect back for me to the intention and impact framework there, right? Because, you know, especially my background in psychology, I live in thoughts, feelings, human behavior all day long. And oftentimes, you know, we don't even realize, even if we think we can identify kind of our own experience and imagine what might be happening for that other person, our ability to read the room, there is a much, much kind of deeper self-awareness required there that, you know, I can say something in anger, right? It can come out angry. It can land in the way that we expect anger to land on somebody else. But if I'm not actually 100% in tune with what's happening with me in that moment, I actually can't change my communication because I can just say, well, I'm angry, end of story. It's going to come out as anger. But actually, there might be a secondary feeling happening under that anger that maybe what actually is happening for me is anxiety. Maybe we missed a quarter. Maybe I'm worried about a product launch. Maybe there's this underlying fear and anxiety and worry, but the way that it's bubbling up is anger, and that's all I'm aware of. And so it comes through in what is conveyed, and we have no way to adjust that until we actually get even deeper in what's happening with us. And I think the same is true when we think about how we imagine somebody else might feel, right? Flip this interaction. And if you have somebody who is saying something and it really feels like it's being delivered in anger. And so we can imagine, yes, they are angry, but what might else be happening for them deeper in their internal world that we could actually connect with each other. We could meet each other because I am imagining even beyond what I think I'm seeing in reading the room. So there's real depth to this if we dial in that empathy and we dial in that emotional intelligence beyond even the surface.
And I think that's also where the importance of patience really comes into play, because if I immediately just want to communicate something out, maybe I'm feeling angry and I want to just fire off that email very quickly. But sometimes if I take the pause, whether it's a minute, 5 minutes, an hour, overnight, it allows me to reflect and understand, okay, why am I feeling this way? What ultimately is driving that? And then more often I can course correct and change it. And the same thing when you're on the receiving end. When you're receiving a communication that maybe is unpleasant or comes across as anger, a lot of times if you're not patient and you go with your knee-jerk reaction, right, you start to fight fire with fire, tensions continue to go up and nobody wins. And so that's where that patience, that curiosity can come into play to help de-escalate and, as you mentioned, really fully understand where it's coming from, whether it's on your side or the other side of the table.
Absolutely.
As you think about your career success, if I were to say, try and pin it down to one, maybe two key skills that you have from a communication perspective that have really helped contribute to your success today, what would that be?
You know, what comes to mind is the most obvious ones, right? I'm an executive coach. Immediately you think about that curiosity, you think about listening, you think about, really holding space. But when I truly think about the tools that I've leveraged and how they've served me, it's really been about writing. The way that I have really learned how to improve my communication by getting really clear with myself about how I process information. And I know that there are a lot of people and a lot of my clients, they're verbal processors, or it is all about observing or hearing, and that's how they distill information. For me, that tool is writing. I wrote to prep for this.
Mm-hmm.
I write to untangle concepts with my clients outside of session. That process and really understanding how my brain works, how I like to get clear on the things that I'm grappling with and use the tools that I know work really well for me. And for me, that really is the process of writing, whether that's, free write or writing larger content pieces. That is how I get incredibly sharp in what it is that I'm trying to say and really get to wordsmith and massage and play with how I want to say the thing that I'm saying. And so, hands down, every single step of my career, I mean, even thinking back to school, writing has been such a huge catalyst for me to show up and perform as a communicator, whether it's in those small micro moments that we talked about, right, or in much larger forums.
Writing has countless benefits when it comes to developing your communication skills. And I like what you said, that it's not just about writing an email, writing a report, using it to help get your thoughts out, get them clear, determine what's my goal, what do I want my audience to do, what information do they really need, putting a framework around it, whether it is for a podcast, an interview that you're going into for a job, you're meeting with clients, you're meeting with investors, you're preparing a slide deck, right? Most people, what do they do when they have a presentation coming up? They open up PowerPoint or whatever tool they use, they start building their slides, where they really should reel it back, start writing out, as I said, what's my key message? What do I want the audience to take away from this? So it is important. And if I think about the skills gaps with writing today, especially with a multi-generational workforce that communicates so differently, from the very on the one side of it, very short, very abbreviated text, emoticons,
Mm-hmm.
BRBs, to other end where it is very formal documents, memos, a structured writing process. And we just have a big chasm in between, where we need to figure out how do we effectively get our messages across in written form. And for me, that's one of my big pet peeves with the kids going through school, where like, okay, I have a 5-page paper due, or I have to do X number of words. Really shouldn't be focused on the length. We need to be focused on the clarity of the message, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can convey it in 200 words. Why do I need to write 2,000?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is definitely something people need to work on. And one of the things that I always stress, especially with my kids, and in your background, I see the bookshelves with all the books on it. Reading is one of the best ways to improve your communication skills. And I don't care what it is that you're reading, you pick up so much on building a narrative,
Mm-hmm.
telling stories. Outside of just the grammar benefits of it, there's such great benefits to reading when it comes to impacting your writing skills and really overall communication skills.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I always find when I'm in a really good rhythm and habit reading every single day, I'll be honest, that doesn't happen as much as I'd like it to, but you really notice your brain is sharper, you're more
Mhm.
articulate, you can pull concepts together in such a different way than if we're constantly in the Slack back and forth, or the email, or the Zoom calls. That it really is um, reading and writing such important communication tools that I think we don't often realize are absolutely part of communication.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So, shifting gears a little bit and thinking about your communication style, who has been someone from throughout your career that maybe has had an influence on how you communicate? Maybe you've picked up a skill from them, taken it, tweaked it, made it your own, but who's somebody that's had an influence on your style and the way you communicate?
That is certainly a hard one to answer because I have had really incredible mentors throughout my career, and especially, you know, in the work that I do with leaders. You know, there's so many people who I've been inspired by over the course of my career in different stages of my career. But when I really think about kind of the one single person who has been that common thread, and who I still really lean on today, honestly, it's my mother. And a huge part of that is, you know, my mom was a college professor, and growing up with a teacher, you can imagine, and I know, you know, you have taught in
Mm-hmm.
a different stage of your career. There's, it's such a different experience to have your, you know, papers proofread or redlined rather by your mother, and really have a sparring partner at such an early age. And there's so much that she shaped in certainly high school, and really taught me, you know, two huge things that I have really brought into the my entire world of communication. One is, to our earlier discussion, communication isn't just about speaking and listening. It's about writing, it's about reading, it's about facilitation, right? That there's so many different um, modes communication can take, that we often limit ourselves when we're only thinking about it through speaking and listening, or only thinking about it in kind of a conversation format. And then she really taught me, and as she graded my papers, and as she would, you know, really challenge me to think about paragraphs or think about sentences differently, or talk things through with me, she really taught me to be impeccable with my word. And, you know, if you've read the Four Agreements, that's really where it comes from. Is there is such right fit words for what you're trying to say, and it isn't just about using the most sophisticated,
Mm-hmm.
isn't about using the most complex kind of combination of words, but words hold such connotations, such meaning, and can really connect us and drive that impact. So to be truly, truly impeccable, and I think, you know, yeah, these days the BRBs, we can get lazy with
Mm-hmm.
our word choice,
Mm-hmm.
and or we could just be limited with our word choice. And so the thing that I still to this day really challenge myself, whether I'm, you know, wrestling with content or trying to convey something to a client, or even trying to interpret what a client is sharing with me, so much of what I'm thinking through and feeling through is, you know, what are we really trying to say here? What are the shared words and language that we have that might be a better fit here in what we're trying to say than actually the word that we used. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a really big one that I lean on. And yes, my mother is still my favorite sparring partner.
I love hearing that. That's so cool. Yeah, so I love this idea of being impeccable with your word, and it really reminds me of something that I say a lot at home and at work, is that I'm very deliberate with my word choice. Right? I
Mm-hmm.
won't say, you know, for example, say someone on my team, I won't say, you reach out to so and so. I will say, call them.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't get them, leave them a message, text them, email this person, knowing that for every person and every different scenario, a different medium is going to be the right thing. Same thing at home when I'm communicating with my kids, right? I'm very clear with my word choice because they're preteens and teens. So they're going to try and find as much gray area as they can when it comes to that. But yeah, so kind of being impeccable, not overcomplicating your communication. And I think being thoughtful about your word choice really can have a big impact on your communications.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, it comes back to this, to the patience, and it comes back to, you know, if we actually, so on the one hand, yes, how do we create space for conversation? How do we be patient and curious? On the other hand, if we are not deliberate, if we're not specific, then we actually leave a lot of room for assumption.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where things break down, right? Is when I am vague in something or lazy with my word choice, or limited in the words that I'm using, and it puts the burden on others to guess or make assumptions, or take advantage of that gray area
Mm-hmm.
to make different meaning, or um, hear different directions or instructions. And so, we often say that clarity is kind, right? When it comes to
Mm-hmm.
communication, you're actually reducing cycles when you're very deliberate and impeccable and specific with the words that you choose.
Yes. In the absence of communication or the absence of clear communication, people are going to fill in the blanks on their own. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're not communicating anything, they're going to paint the whole picture themselves. But if you're putting something out there and you're not clear, you're not deliberate, you don't have the right details in it, they're just going to fill in all those notes on their own. And as you mentioned, it wastes cycles, right? It wastes energy, it wastes time, and slows a business down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Julia, as we are wrapping up here, what piece of closing advice would you have to folks listening to this, really just around the importance of the skills that we discussed today and the impact they can have on their lives?
This is, again, the psychology side coming out, but it's to really get to know yourself, right? We talk about self-awareness a lot. We talk about authenticity a lot, especially in the context of leadership. But if you want to get patient, if you want to get curious, if you want to really grow your emotional intelligence, if you want to really master the intention versus impact, it really starts with getting to know yourself first, right? We can watch others and we can emulate others as much as we want, but it's really hard to make any kind of adjustments if we don't actually know where something is innately coming from within ourselves, whether that's on the speaking side or the listening side or the writing side or the facilitation side, right? That we really have to truly get to know ourselves beyond the surface, beyond the labels, and beyond even those kind of reactive tendencies that we talked about. And I think, at Congruent Leadership, we talk a lot about how the most effective leaders are congruent. And that process of building congruent really starts with getting to know yourself as deeply and authentically as possible. And I think that really, really contributes to communication, because communication is the single most powerful tool we use almost every single second of our waking moments, right? It goes back to those micro moments. So if you don't have a handle on why you do what you do, why you think what you think, why you feel what you feel, and expect that whatever you're conveying through words or body language is going to come out the way that you intend and have the impact on others that you want it to, then you're missing the most critical piece, which is you as the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that I really, really try to work on, especially with clients, is to slow them down and to get really curious, starting with themselves first. Then it becomes so much easier to interact and navigate communication, especially the interpersonal communication, everywhere you go.
Yeah, I think you nailed it when you talked about getting to the why,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why am I acting this way? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I communicating like this during these types of scenarios or reacting to things this way? I think when you get to that why, it really is eye-opening. I've had a number of instances like that throughout my career where I've started to do that evaluation and figure, okay, here's what's driving this, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a fear, it's an anxiety, it's a stressor, whatever it may be. Understanding that why really will have a big impact on your communications.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Julie, if folks want to get in touch with you to learn a little bit more about the work that you do and congruent leadership, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can head to our website, congruentleadership.com. I'm actually excited to announce that we just launched a new product. It's a coaching membership on a platform. So it's a combination of really intentionally curated coaching content plus direct access to me, whether that's office hours or a small group workshop, to really nail some of the specific challenges that leaders often face, especially at particular stages of growth. And so you could find the platform on our website as well. It's just congruentleadership.com/platform. Happy to give all our listeners here a free early access and 1 month trial. And then we are also on Instagram at Congruent Leadership. And those are the best places to find a little bit more about our work and me and all the stuff that we love working on with leaders.
Perfect. I will be sure to put links to all of that in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, be sure to check out the notes. You'll find links to the website and the platform. Julia, thank you so much. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Me as well. Thanks for having me.
Special thanks again to my guest, Julia Quijano. From the power of curiosity and emotional intelligence to mastering the small moments that define great leadership, there's so much to take away from this episode. As we wrap up, remember that mastering communication is a continuous journey. Make sure to stay connected with Communicast by subscribing so you can benefit from conversations with future guests. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful for your support. Leaving a rating or review is a fantastic way to let us know the impact this show has had on you. Thanks, and have a great day.